Good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast. To those of you in the Central Time Zone, we want to wish you a good morning. Those following us from Israel, from Europe, and parts abroad, a good evening. Today we have someone not only who's incredibly special and thoughtful, but we have someone who is right now going through what the worst possible nightmare one could ever imagine, and that is Ruby Chen. Ruby, his wife, Chagit, live in Israel. Ruby grew up in Flatbush. He has been very gracious to us. We've had him as a guest before. And their son, Itai, who fought valiantly on the Gaza border on October 7th in a tank brigade, unfortunately was missing. And there's intelligence reports as to his status, which Ruby will share with us. But what they have gone through over the course of the last 500 days, no human being should ever have to go through. And Ruby is going to share with us the story of Itai, and then we'll have a chance to ask him questions to get his perspective and to get just a small, brief understanding of what it's like to be the father of a soldier, the father of a hostage under these conditions. Ruby, we know this is not easy, and we want to thank you for addressing us, for addressing the American people. And thank you for joining us.
Sure. Thanks for having me again. It's unfortunate that this tragedy just keeps on going. I would have preferred to be in a conversation with you in another chapter that we were able to begin, but unfortunately that has not been the case. So as introduced, I grew up in New York City and moved to Israel as a teenager, but went back to New York and did NYU. Met my wife at Tel Aviv University, and she basically told me, with all due respect to my U.S. citizenship, we are going to live in Netanya, and that's what happened. We have 3 kids. The eldest recently finished his service in the IDF in an intelligence unit. His name is Weil. The youngest is Alon. He had his bar mitzvah a week after October 7th, which was something which was difficult at itself. And Itai is the middle sibling. So, the middle sibling, he's the most challenging one. Those of you that are parents and listening, the eldest, he gets the phone first, he gets the car keys first. The youngest is the youngest, so, even in our case, Itai, he was the one that needed to find his path. And he loved multiple extracurricular activities. My wife, Chagit, is the ultimate soccer mom, where there was never an extracurricular activity he did not want to do, from singing to dancing, climbing on walls. He mostly fell in love with being a Boy Scout, at least the equivalent of being a Boy Scout here in Tel Aviv, giving counsel to younger kids. And he also fell in love with basketball. As a proud New Yorker, avid New York Knicks fan. For the love of God, I do not know how Itai became a Celtics fan. And missing just talking to the kid, and watching a ball game together. Itai is what we call a Super Bowl baby. He was born on the eve of the Super Bowl, so 2004. I thought the wife was being nice and wanted to give me some time alone, but she actually had other plans for us that morning and that evening, excuse me. And Itai was born then. He is also a German citizen, so that's via his mother. So at the age of 18, he had multiple options in front of him, from going to college, going to Europe, whatever, but he grew up on the values of being here in the state of the Jews and wanted to protect the state of the Jewish people. And he joined the tanks division. And he was at, his base, which was on the border of Gaza, that October 7th. We got to listen to the black box and heard, what they needed to go through, which at the beginning, a lot of chaos, was the Wild West. Pretty quickly, but they did what they were supposed to do, and then some more. And at some point in time, after a few hours where no backup came, they saw the border being um, uh, full of a new wave of sailors coming in, and they decided to do what they were taught to do in the army, and that was to make sure that those savages would not get to the kibbutzes near them or to the bases that were near, and just took the tank and started making sure that they wouldn't get where they needed to get to. Those terrorists, unfortunately, they were outnumbered, and a tank is not supposed to be in close combat. And Hamas put some explosives on the tank, and that's how the story of this tank ended after a couple of hours. Initially, we had no idea about Itai and his whereabouts. He was deemed as missing in action, meaning no one knew physically where he was. He wasn't in one of the hospitals, and he wasn't on that list that nobody wanted to be on. After a couple of days, we got a knock on the door where the IDF told us that he's not in Israel. We don't know where he is. Most likely he's in Gaza. And that was confirmed a few days afterwards. As a U.S. citizen, I took the lead to try to organize the U.S. citizens that were not accounted for and were taken hostage. At the beginning, there were 14 such cases where we had a case manager. We had a team from State Department supporting us. After a couple of days, we got down to 12. If you remember the family from Chicago, the Iran family that were let go. And in November, we had 2 U.S. citizens that were released. One, Liat Tatili, where her husband is still killed and is being held hostage. And the 4-year-old Abigail, that her parents were killed and was taken as a hostage. And for a long time, we were 8 hostages until that fatal September 1st, where Hamas went and killed 6 hostages, point blank. One of them being a U.S. citizen, Helsh Goldberg, Poland. And we were 7. And last week, a U.S. citizen by the name of Keith Siegel was released. And now we are 6 U.S. citizens after almost 500 days. I myself have been leading the activities of the U.S. families, advocating and being in Washington and going to the White House multiple times. We've had the opportunity to meet President Biden and the Vice President on multiple occasions. We have a weekly call with the White House, and they've done what they could to support us. Unfortunately, the bottom line of it is that the previous administration was not able to get a new deal going after November. With the new administration coming in, the so-called Trump effect was actual, which moved the existing negotiations in the last days of the Biden administration to a new place, that they were able to sign this deal that we see at the moment, this framework, which focuses on 33 hostages that are supposed to come out. We are in the middle of that phase, but we need to remind ourselves there are still 76 hostages today, with a percentage that is not small of also deceased hostages. And we, the Jewish people, of course, cherish not only the living, but also the deceased that need to have a place. As we say, rest in peace means the soul needs to have a resting place. And these are also values of the United States. We know that even today, the United States sends out teams to Vietnam to find fallen soldiers, because if they die for their country, they deserve the respect and dignity of having a resting place for them and a place for their families to have to mourn. And it's a topic that is also close to us. Unfortunately, in March, we were notified most likely Itai was killed on October 7th. There's no hard evidence uh, on Itai. As such, when we were told by the rabbi we could do a shiva, we actually said we will wait until Itai is physically back with us, and then we will deal with whatever we need to deal with. We have some hope, small percentage, but we hope that maybe some doctor was able to see him somehow. Maybe some miracle could happen. And we continue to advocate because nothing after March changed Itai's status, which he is first and foremost defined as a hostage. And this new administration is doing whatever it can to bring all the hostages back. We hear President Trump and his statements. We are positive when he says all the hostages, he means all the hostages, including the 6 US citizens and including the deceased. Ever since the new administration came about, we've built relationships with them where we've been into the White House a couple of times with the National Security Advisor and with Mr. Witkoff. That has been very helpful, very open communication with us. And we just need to continue to have the international community behind us, as well as the Jewish community in the United States, and actually also all the US citizens should care about this topic, regardless of Jewish or not Jewish, because it is a humanitarian crisis for us, and anyone that is a US citizen should feel compelled to support us, the US citizens. And we here in Israel focusing our government that this should be the #1 priority, even before the dismantling of Hamas. And we need to continue the support of anyone that is able and willing to support us. Even in the United States, each and every one of you listening could be called to action to call up your congressman, call up your senator, and say that I'm a concerned US citizen, and ask them, what have you done today, to help bring these hostages out, including these US citizens? Maybe I'll pause here and just, kind of open it to questions and have a Q&A.
Ruby, I'm going to start out with 2 questions that we have for you. And again, feel free not to answer them, to answer differently, whatever you like. The experience emotionally between your wife, yourself, your 2 boys who are in Israel, after getting that news in March, that the army, although they don't have forensic proof of it, in their opinion, they think that Itai and the others in that tank that fought so valiantly for those first hours of the war are no longer alive. If you could describe Ruby before that March meeting, and then Ruby afterwards.
Yeah, that's a difficult question. The motivation of knowing that each day, he is suffering, motivates someone to try to put that child in a safe place. And it very much motivates you to do whatever is possible. And as stated, when we got the message and the meeting and they showed us what they could share with us, it dawned upon us that his status did not change. He's still a hostage. And we know that the IDF has the obligation to bring back all of its soldiers. And when you go to battle, as I know, when I was an IDF soldier, that if something happened to me, the IDF would bring me back no matter what. And that is something that we hold on as continued motivation to continue to fight for this cause, where it is inconceivable to get a notice like that and just have a kid disappear. And where is he? And it doesn't enable you to move to the next phase of acknowledgement and recognition. Like, we are still in the trauma phase, In order to get to the post-trauma phase, you need to pass through a gate. And a lot of fallen IDF families, victims, they have that process of you get notified, you have a funeral, you have a Shiva, and then you have a place to go to. And we are going through this psychological warfare and torture. Well, we're kind of like in limbo. Well, we don't have that process. And as such, it's kind of abstract. And my family has decided to continue the fight. The other families that have said, you know what, I'm done. But I, as a father, can't compute, paths going forward without making sure my son is where he's supposed to be. And that's being with us, whatever physical status that might be.
I had the blessing of knowing and being friendly with Yona and Miriam Baumel and their son, Zach Baumel. And I think it was 1983 or 1982, in the first Lebanon war, was abducted. And Yona said to me, he says, you don't understand. He says, you as a regular citizen or person get a phone call. He says, you decide, pick up the phone, don't pick up the phone. He said, Miriam and I, we go into trauma every time the phone rings. Is that going to be the call that our son's alive, that our son's dead, but at least they're bringing our son home? He says, you go into physical trauma every time the phone rings. And tragically, Yona died, never knowing what was the whereabouts of his son. His son was brought home. It was a function of Bibi's relationship with Vladimir Putin. They brought Zach home, obviously no longer alive, and Miriam was able to bury her son a year or two before she died.
But 35 years.
What?
30 years? They waited?
30-some years.
I don't want to wait 30 years. So that's not a good example. Maybe I'll share an intimate conversation we had with Mr. Witkoff, Steve Witkoff, who was the special president envoy for the Middle East and has been spearheading this event. It's mostly known publicly that Mr. Witkoff lost his son a few years ago, overdose. Very tragic what happened. And when me and my wife, we met him and shared with him our tragedy, he said, I get you. I know what it means as a parent to lose a loved one. And my wife looked at him and said, there's that piece that you don't get us, which is when you, Mr. Witkoff, need to be with your son and mourn, you have a place to go to. We don't. It took 30 seconds to kind of process what we were saying. And he understood. And he said to my wife, I will not disappoint you. And that's the hope that we have with this new administration, that indeed it's been too long. And you could blame whoever you want. I don't care. I just look at the bottom line. And everyone is to blame that this ordeal, we are simple people. We do not see ourselves as politicians. This topic should not be coupled with bigger issues of the day after, what is happening in Gaza, what's going to happen in the Middle East. These are topics that for decades have been discussed and have not been able to be solved. We demand from the Prime Minister, we demand from my government in the United States to do whatever is possible to end all tragedy. Let us have closure. And then you could keep on talking and doing and whatever. But I would ask the friends of the IDF to understand the soldier, values that he was brought up on, went to battle. He needs to come back. And that becomes and supersedes any other topic you might have. And do not use this tragedy for politics or for whatever motivation or ideological goals you might have. And just keep that message crystal clear. Hostages first, before Hamas, before anything else.
Can you share with us the experience emotionally, the bond between the various families, those who, whether dead or alive, their children have been brought home, their husbands been brought home, their wives been brought home, and those who are still waiting, the 76 families who, as you said it, have no closure, have no sense of closure. Share with us the relationships, the bonds, working together, working with the Israeli government, the American government, with world leaders, etc.
So it is a special bond. These are my new family members. We're happy when some of them have gotten closure. The Golden family, they met us and said, welcome. We didn't know what that meant at the beginning, but they've become family as well, and have joined our journey and have been trying to guide us. The U.S. families, we've gone to Washington dozens of occasions and had hundreds of meetings in Washington. And at the end, these families are the ones that you end the day and open a bottle of wine and you could talk about things that you cannot talk to anybody else and nobody gets. So they become close family to us. And I'm positive that they will stay family for the rest of our lives. We have, one another to lean on. There are those days that are more difficult, such as we had in March. The Neutra family from Long Island, they had that also bad black day about 2 months ago. So who could talk to them and help them process, So we were there for them like they were there for us. We hope that the Alexander family from New Jersey, has a different ending. And we hope that next week, this Saturday, Jonathan Dekel and his son, Sagi, from Florida, he hopefully should be on the list and hopefully he comes out. Hopefully the United States is able to front load the U.S. citizens. So yeah, they've become my family and we work as a team and we have calls with the White House and Mr. Witkoff and others. And that's how we kind of operate. Everybody does what he can.
You've been incredibly articulate. You've been very gracious and open with us. If you could leave us with a message, our job, our charge, the last time we interviewed you, that's where we left off, and that is our responsibility. Not that we owe to you, that we should owe to any human being in terms of the citizens in America. They're Jews and Christians who are going to be watching this. What is our role and what should we be doing if we have even the slightest or the most remotest sensitivity to what you, your wife, and your two boys are going through vis-a-vis Itai's abduction, vis-a-vis Itai's status as a hostage?
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but this topic has been somewhat normalized, and it shouldn't. And anyone that is on this topic or asked about it should be able to articulate and advocate that this is unacceptable. And, as U.S. citizens, I would ask you again to call up your senator, call up your congressman, and say that this is unacceptable. And what have they done today? And end the call by saying, I will call tomorrow and ask the same question. And there's various legislation that we've been trying to push in Congress to help us and provide more leverage to enable Mr. Witkoff and his toolbox to have more tools to be able to should decides to get to an agreement and release the last hostage. We focus on simple question. When is the last hostage coming out? We don't ask about when the next hostage is coming out. We ask about the last one. And I ask you to focus on that question as well, whenever you have the ability to make an impact. The Friends of the IDF have been very supportive of the families. I have been on the steering committee of the families and know all the great things that you guys have done. So I want to thank every single one of you for whatever type of support you've given us, the families. Unfortunately, it does not end when we get the message or even reunited. There's a long rehabilitation process. That this is uncharted waters for everybody. And I'm sure that this organization could be helpful in thinking what more can be done to help the families that have been reunited, but even more so to those that are still in the fight and want to get to that checkpoint, to that gate, and not be in a status where we need to wait 10 years or 30 years. This window of opportunity closes every single day. That we know that we will not be able to get all the 76 hostages. There will be those that will be lost. And each day that passes by, the count of those being lost grows. Each day, a little bit more, one more will not come back. So the urgency is also something that I wish you to remember, that we do not want to be in a place like Arad, that there were multiple opportunities in the past to bring him back, and he never came back. So please continue to advocate on our behalf and be with us, not till we get to that gate of being reunited, but actually afterwards, and continue to support us.
As Jews throughout our lives, we study and we're taught ethics of the fathers, Pirkei Avot. And it says there, B'shah shemeto muto lefanav al tenachamehu. A person is just not capable of being able to start to rebuild and move forward. A person is not capable of closure until the body is buried, until psychologically they've done everything they can for their loved one. And that's all theoretical. And we sit, and we have this dialogue with you, Ruby, and those words, those painful words, they just jump out of the page as you describe, what you are going through, Chagit is going through, what others are going through. And that this false narrative of there's a distinction between the live and the dead hostages, between the live and the hostage, we don't know their status, etc. The Goldens haven't had closure since 2014, and we have 75 other families that have not had closure for the last 500 days. And for you to share that with us and make that clear that we should not be passive, we thank you. We thank you very much for that. And God only knows what you're going through, you, your family, and the others.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for listening. And you might not think so, but having every day some sort of support gives us some more energy to get out of bed and continue to at least do what we can to get closure. So even if you think it's something not that important, but actually it is, so just keep on doing what you're doing and continue to support us. And again, as U.S. citizens, there's a bond between us that getting your support is very important for me and my family.
Ruby, thank you.
Thank you for having me.